Everyone. Hi. Good morning. Or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar series. I see that we're getting more and more people to join. That's wonderful. So for those of you who have been attending regularly, I'm so happy to see you again. And for those of you who are new, welcome. Welcome to our webinar series. My name is Jack, and I am part of the California School for the Deaf outreach group, and that's under CORE, C-O-R-E, which is Curriculum, Outreach, Resources, Education, Resource Education. So that's called CORE, and we provide a webinar. We have been providing a webinar series for a while, but then COVID had to, make us think differently and how to share our resources. And so we get a curriculum specialist to provide training for supporting mainstream teachers of the deaf, or different types of training, maybe for SLPs. And then when COVID hit, that forced us to kind of continue with the distance learning and use a webinar. So these things are really universal, no matter what state. It has the same benefits. So we really wanted to share this. This is our second year doing this because we've had a lot of demand for it. So we're really looking forward to 2023 and what we can share then. So let me back up a second. This webinar will be recorded and will be released. And we are working on our 2 previous ones. We're hoping to get those released by next week and kind of catch up. But so this is recorded, and we have interpreters for both ASL and Spanish. And I just wanted to make sure that this webinar is also accessible for Spanish-speaking families. So now with this session, we will be using chat and Q&A. And in the chat, make sure you type in any comments or just say hi, or, like any reflections that you get from this. Now, the questions, though, you have, keep that for the actual Q&A. So don't put that in the chat right now. So that's important because we want to make sure that we keep those for the very end, and then we will share those. We will also translate all of those questions. If we run out of time, though, don't worry. We will copy those questions, whatever we have left in the Q&A, and our speaker will answer all of those, and then we can put those together on the recording and then send those all to everyone who has registered, okay? And we will be monitoring the chat for maybe somebody who joins later and tries to ask a question, and I will remind those participants to hold that for the Q&A. So now with this topic today, we're going to talk about how deaf children in their early start education, they might have unilateral hearing loss, mild hearing loss, profound hearing loss. So we're going to learn about how they use both spoken English and signed ASL. And so I'm going to present our speaker. That's David, and his background is, he used to teach early start education, and so he is passionate about language. And so we're so thrilled to have him come to use his time to and be involved in our core curriculum and explain what he knows. So welcome, David. Hi, hello. I'm going to go ahead and can we move the interpreters on screen? Just a second. Go ahead, sure. Hi everyone. I see some of you who have joined are my friends. Hi, Darren from Canada. Different people from California and all over. So I'm glad to see you here in the chat in this virtual room. Now, can everybody see? Can you see me clearly? I like to have the interpreters, the ASL English interpreter and the Spanish interpreter with me on the screen, because I really want to show how working with 3 or 4 different languages works and how we have to, we accommodate that and manage that as best as possible. So first, before we begin, 26 years ago, I started my career in early childhood education department here at California School for the Deaf in Fremont. And I was a student aide in the infant class. And, it was right after I had graduated, and I really was interested in how 2 languages, how babies develop. And now 26 years later, when I have free time between my job that I have now, I like to come visit the infant program. And I've seen that the deaf babies have really, there's a similarity between hearing babies and kids with, maybe have cochlear implants. But so for 30 plus years, the bye movement in North America, I wanted to think about how we could preserve the our deaf ASL language. And I wanted to, hopefully, rather than just tell you everything, I'm going to give you some examples in this workshop. Okay. Let's play the next slide. Okay, first, this is from Gallaudet University. It's a very short clip, and it's going to be talking about the brain and language. So let me unmute. Oh.
While evidence tells us that the brain is bioprogrammed to learn language, it does not show the brain is biased to learning language only through speech. The brain is looking for patterns, and those patterns can be visual and/or auditory. Signs or sounds arranged in a specific way, which then begin to take on meaning. Research confirms that the auditory cortex of the brain responds the exact same way to spoken language as it does to sign language. That means there's no difference, neurologically speaking, between the 2 languages.
I think we're having some technical difficulties. 1 second.
Yeah.
But let's start again. I think hopefully we fix the problem.
Oh,
Better, can you all see the video? But we can't hear. We can't hear it.
That same way.
1 moment. We'll try this again.
that,
Now you should be able to both hear and see it. Try to make sure this is acceptable. I'm not
While
muted.
evidence tells us that the brain is bioprogrammed to learn language, it does not show the brain is biased to learning language only through speech. The brain is looking for patterns, and those patterns can be visual and or auditory. Signs or sounds arranged in a specific way, which then begin to take on meaning. Research confirms that the auditory cortex of the brain responds the exact same way to spoken language as it does to sign language. That means there's no difference, neurologically speaking, between these two languages. Language is language, spoken or signed. So how does the brain develop these patterns?
Okay, we're gonna stop right there. One moment. Everyone see the PowerPoint now? Okay, so he just explained the science of the brain. There's a part of the brain, no matter if you use spoken or sign language, all languages are processed in the same area of the brain. And that would explain why our CODAs, hearing children of deaf adults, can use spoken language, even though their parents may not speak at all. You know, maybe a CODA has an all deaf family, but they can still speak and have that spoken language. And, you know, most deaf parents have hearing babies, 90% of them. So, and, you know, maybe a small percent of them might need some extra support in language, but most hearing babies of deaf adults do just fine. In the past 200 years of deaf education, a lot of deaf students have developed just the same as any hearing child with spoken language, because it's processed in the same area of the brain. So just keep that in mind. Before I go on, I want to talk about some terminology. One is multicultural. Now we've started talking about bicultural. We use the word bi means bilingual, bicultural, meaning, you know, deaf culture, hearing culture, spoken language, sign language. So now we've had research done about different deaf people, all races. So the bicultural is kind of a dated term. And the important thing is the languages that are used, ASL and English. We don't want to neglect their other languages. So the school teaches in maybe ASL and English. So there might be some multi-languages, but the cultural part is very clear. Now, people with two languages cannot use both languages at the same time. We talk about both languages all day in school, ASL English, but in these, but that does not mean that we can use SIMCOM, or simultaneous communication, meaning using the voice and signing at the same time. I wonder if any one of you, maybe, can you write two different languages, say English and French at the same time? Can anybody write a sentence in two different languages at the same time and continue? If you can, please let me know. I'll give you $1 million. Anybody who's good at that, you know, 2 or 3 languages writing at the same time, I would be very interested in that, but it's not possible. So it's the same thing as signing and speaking at the same time. Both languages are not clear at the same time. So I'm not saying you know, a lot of families do use SimCom, but it's not, but we encourage families to try to set a time to turn off their voice, maybe bath time, 30 minutes, so the parents can experience what it feels like to not use their voice and just use sign. And at the school, we only use sign, and we'll talk more on that later. Here at CSD, the word deaf applies to everyone because there are different kinds of hearing loss, different hearing acuity. It's a big variety, and there is no uniform agreement in the audiology field that defines exactly what hard of hearing is that, which decibel would that start. You know, some people say 40, some people say 60. So there's no universal definition of exactly what that means. So we just say deaf. That applies to all hearing loss levels. And also early start tends to mean 0 to 3 or sometimes 0 to 5. So bimodal means using vision or auditory. So bimodal means at the same time. So, but that is not the same as SimCom. It just means using your visual abilities and your hearing abilities. Our understanding of ASL has really improved in the last 30 years. And we have studied it so much. And the same in the English language. It used to be, one second, I'm sorry, the interpreter. Time out for the interpreter. Please start that sentence again. Okay. So our idea of English, under English, it's not just print only. There's spoken English, there's print English, there's we have concepts for both sign language and spoken English language. But what we know is our kids who have a lot of speech or unilateral hearing loss, they tend to speak, they speak the words that they know the signs for already. If they know the sign for ball, then they will use the spoken word ball. They don't use different words that they don't know in sign language. So there is a correlation. In general, there's a lot of different definitions of what bilingual means, but Francis Grosjean, probably not pronouncing that right, says this about bilinguals. There are, one second. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry for the interruption. There are some people that only want to see me on the screen and not the interpreters because it's a little distracting for some people. So I will do that for you. Let's go ahead and take the interpreters off the screen. Okay. So interpreters, can you turn off your video? One? Okay, great. Is that better? Okay. I know that can be distracting visually. Okay, so we're going to talk about this quote again. If you remember, there are a lot of, over 30 definitions of what bilingual means. But we're going to talk about this specific definition. And you can read that. We use two languages. We don't use two languages at the same time all the time. We may have some situations where we change, whether it's written, spoken, signed. Different languages serve different purposes. Maybe if it's a deaf person who has never signed, you might use English with that deaf person, but that moving around in languages, I just want to make clear that we use different languages, but never at the same time. Now, if you can read this slide, this is for everyone involved. So, there's a training on bilingual and language acquisitions, deaf community, all of that. There are similarities of what we teach in school. We want to teach in the families as well, so that there can be consistent language access. And now more and more hearing parents are able to sign. So that training needs to be the same with everyone involved, the deaf agency, the school, the parents, we're all in this together. But some of us have different roles. Now for the staff for the early um, childhood, we never use our voices, but the students maybe will use them, their peers, we're never going to tell them not to use their voice, or the parents, but we're all in this together. And some things that we do here at CSD, I'll give you an example of some of the things that we do at CSD. We have a strong family education program where there's emphasis on language acquisition and development, so that parents can know which skills belong where and provide training. We have a Friday play group. We have webinars like this. We have small classrooms for parents only. We also have big ASL classrooms for like a big community event in class. So plus our families have access to a lot of our early start specialists so that they can have their questions answered. And so the parents also have some linguistic knowledge like we do. And they're learning at the same time as their child is developing language. So that means their spoken, receptive language, their signing, written language. So we had, one second, please. I'm sorry, I forgot I wasn't on the video and you can't see me anymore. Say the AC, I missed that. Oh, our Parents Association. Sorry about that. So, my bad. That's better than this sign, right? I tend to abbreviate it, association. So we have parent associations so that they can see that there are a lot of parents that that are deaf and have deaf hearing, and they have very similar hearing losses, and so they know what to do. And so our hearing families can learn from our deaf families, and we can all learn from each other. Plus, in the deaf community, we have pull-ins. We're very lucky in the Bay Area to have a deaf organization. We have a Black deaf area advocates. We have the Bay Area is very rich in diversity. So there's a very diverse deaf community. And for example, if there's an Indian family, for example, that has a deaf child, we have services for that. We're not perfect, but we're getting better. And if we don't have any staff of color, there are agencies, community agencies that we are partnered with and are trained on multi-language, so that everybody knows what to do and that we're all on the same page. Okay, so we've made a lot of mistakes in the past. One of them was saying no to sign language. One of them was, requiring oral speech all day long, and those things have not worked. That has really only led to a variety of problems. And not only that, there's confusion. The deaf person comes to school and they're confused about which language to use. And some of those old mistakes in the past are just connected to old myth. Now, I want to emphasize that all of these are wrong. They are not correct statements, such as sign language is just gestures. That's not true. Or sign language is based on spoken language. And it's just kind of like broken English. That's not true either. Another one is sign language will hinder written language. And the other one that was really big back in the day. People said that if if a deaf child learns sign language, it will hinder their spoken language. That's still a myth that continues today, but it's just not true. It's not true. It never was true. So again, it's the same area of the brain that processes language. That's the important part. And I'm not, making all of this stuff up. There is actual research, and I'm not going to go into all of this, but these are by SLPs, speech and language pathologists. They've researched this, and they have found that yes, ASL does help spoken language. So there's lots of articles to prove and to see how sign language does help spoken language. And again, those children will speak the words that they already know in sign language. So it used to be that folks wanted a big separation of deaf children and hold off on their education and just focus solely on oral language, but that's not the way that we do it anymore. So let me just check my time here. Okay, CSD. Here at CSD, we have music in our classrooms. Some people use their voices, but the faculty and staff does not use their voices. The kids might, use their voices and chatter. We have some older kids who have gone through our programs and they talk to each other. There's deaf teachers, hearing teachers, but the hearing teacher does not use the voice. They just sign. So, and again, we don't say no to speech if the kids use their speech. We have campus tours here at CSD, and we might have SLPs come here, or just hearing parents and say, oh, I hear so much talking here at the deaf school here in 2022. Yeah, the teachers we'll see that, and that's fine. I think maybe a couple of weeks ago there was a tour and there was an elementary school that somebody screamed idiot. And everybody that was hearing could hear that. They use their voice, and sometimes we do have to intervene and say, make sure that they're being appropriate and using their voice appropriately if they are using it. So but everything we do here has a purpose, has a reason. And we do have pull-out time for speech therapy. Sometimes the speech therapist comes into the classroom and helps the student. And also, as our kids are growing up, we've seen them, they might, they might socialize with other children who have maybe similar hearing loss. Some of them may be able to hear music. Some of them might not hear music, but are fascinated with music. So we have a really healthy mix of different kinds of students. One thing that I really want to emphasize is to keep the language separate for faculty, staff, agencies, everyone who provides services to students. Don't do this, SimCom. You can take turns, that's fine, but and we're not going to tell our parents, that they can't do that, but we'll let them develop that on their own. That child might benefit from that at home, but we want to make sure that we're clear at school that we use sign language. Now, that doesn't mean there's no access to sound. They're able to use their voice unless it's out of hand. So we do want to keep those languages separate. And if you can see this list, hearing babies from 0 to 6 months and deaf babies, if you notice that they're not exactly the same. So if a baby is born, doesn't matter their hearing or CODIS, they will sign, oh, I'm sorry, a deaf baby will sign their first word at 8 months old. A hearing baby will speak their first word at 12 months old. Why is the deaf baby ahead? It might be a deaf child or a coda. Um, you know, it's because babies gesture and point and all of this stuff early on. And if the parents are signing and they acquire language that way, they're using the same modality. They're using their hands, and it becomes more sophisticated from gestures into actual sign language. But a hearing baby starts with gestures, and they have to move in, they have to switch from that modality of using their hands to using their voice. Doesn't mean that the deaf baby is like intellectually ahead of the hearing baby. They will start to level out about age 2. So it's just a difference in their development and growth. Now, all of these, might apply to unilateral deafness, or, profound deafness, or it doesn't matter. We still use ASL first. We still use sign language first because the skill is already there. They are gesturing, and that turns into more sophisticated sign language. So, and it doesn't even matter if they have maybe a high hearing level. So just keep that in mind. So with early exposure to sign language, there's a lot of similarities. Now let's put that aside for a moment. Forget deafness for one moment. So hearing people, when they have a baby and they don't speak to them like they do an adult. They don't use big words and make sure that the grammar and everything is perfect. They might babble to them or use a high-pitched voice or use kind of a sing-songy, hi, that kind of thing, like nursery rhymes. And so the baby looks and is exposed to that and uses, but in sign language, the same thing is true. It's called parentese, and there is ASL parentese also. You use, signs and gestures with the babies that are, age appropriate. So I'm going to show you what that might look like, spoken and signed. Now, as you see, the parent was saying very simple words to the baby. That applies to deaf and hearing babies alike. It's not like they, use speech all day. That will come naturally, and it will come whether or not you sign with a baby. And this is talking about hearing adults. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about what we do at CSD that seems to be very successful. The reason is our department, like for example, we would get, a lot of babies with cochlear implants or something like that. And we used to completely change language, but now we just let that happen naturally, and we don't try to control language. We give them a structure, but and the thing we want to stress again is that all of the providers, faculty, and staff don't use their voice and just provide sign language. So we've used this method of trying to do oral education for 200 years, and that hasn't really worked. So I'm going to give you an example of this a little bit later. We have in this slide talking about acquisition and learning. Learning is a little bit more structured, whereas acquisition is natural, and we do use both of these at CSD. All deaf students will use all of these bullet points. One deaf child might be a lot more skilled in one than the other. Maybe there's a deaf child that's very skilled in all of them, and all of those things are fine. But the point is, we don't separate out the kids like we did before, the ones who, maybe have more hearing or have more speech. All of the faculty and staff use the best practice in deaf education. It's student-centered, so we like to keep it that way. These are things that we can do right now. We could modify our approach. Point, finger spell, point. Families can use speech and sign, and also, of course, the speech teachers. That's fine. Our hearing families do that now. A lot of hearing parents tell us that at home they will use ASL and signing and speech, and it works for. I'm sorry, they use only ASL at home, and that's what we do here. If a hearing teacher hears something, it's okay for that hearing teacher to say, "Oh, hey, I heard a dog bark over here," but using ASL, informing the children that there are sounds going on. Rhyming can be hard. We use the last maybe syllable of a word to kind of match, so we have to point that out, and ask the kids. They can in the infant class, they don't usually talk a lot anyway. So hearing children, when they use emotions, they might get use their voice bigger, and it's the same thing with ASL. So here at Fremont CSD, this woman is Laura. She's hearing, and the deaf woman, they both have very strong backgrounds in education and language and everything. So it's really fascinating that a deaf professional and a hearing professional work together, and how they make decisions and collaborate. Laura is hearing, but she does not use her voice all day long. She uses sign language. But one thing is very good for all of the kids. Those kids, they have cochlear implants. Some of them have hearing aids. Some of them have deaf parents. So there's a variety of kids, a good mix in that school. And it's the same in the infant class. And, they look at maybe a video that has the sound on and the captions on, and they all do just fine because they have different access points. They can hear, some of them can hear, um, and it's just really fascinating. Let me show you like their faces. Again, some of them have hearing aids, cochlear implant, one of them's hearing. Oh, the one in the middle um, has deaf parents and is hearing. So they're all watching the same thing at the same time. And the staff and teachers are using sign language, no voice, but the TV has voice on. And so they're, clapping and cheering and singing along to the video. So this is the teacher signing and identifying characters. Oh, that's a girl, that's a boy, that's, different characteristics of the story. And to me, that's just a good description of using language at the same time, not SimCom, but, having maybe an ASL teacher, a teacher that uses ASL there and English print. And we don't divide up the kids. And that way really works very well. And even if they're hearing, they will learn English. And it helps all the kids. So kind of in summary, the bottom line is don't repeat all of our old mistakes. Sometimes you might hear things that may sound scary, but a lot of those were myths, and they will develop language. So speech will automatically happen for hearing babies. And there was one hearing boy that his deaf brother is in the program, and the hearing boy is picking up ASL. So again, remember, if the ASL is good for hearing babies, then obviously it's good for a deaf baby, right? And last slide is just do it. Don't use your voice with family practice sessions. Just know when to use your voice. With our older kids in elementary school, sometimes we couple them up. Some people, and they can change. You can use your voice or not. But for the staff and faculty, we want to make it clear that we only sign. Okay. I think that was it. Can we get Jack back on here? Jack? Hello, Jack? Okay. Hi, Jack. Do we have time for questions? I think we have a Q&A. Are you going to sign the questions, Jack? Yeah, let me do that. And and I'll answer them. Okay, I'm going to read out some of these questions. My partner and I are deaf parents of a baby with unilateral deafness, and I'm curious if there are any signs for unilateral, like, there's CODAs, deaf and hard of hearing, deaf babies of deaf adults. I'm just wondering if there are specific signs for that group. And the other thing is, they're unilaterally deaf, but not unilaterally. There's unilateral deafness, but not unilateral hearing. Can you? Yeah, that's. It's kind of like adding more specifics onto deafness, like a Black deaf person or a Jewish Black person. So I would say for now, right now, until they're old enough, they can kind of identify more of what they use. Like, for example, codas technically, or they're kind of both deaf and hearing, sort of, you know what I mean? So maybe those children, they might not be unilateral anymore. Depends on their family. I know one family, that has hearing children, but they know that their children will grow up to be deaf. It's a genetic thing in their family. So that's an interesting thing. So it may not be a permanent thing on the deaf spectrum. I'm not sure about that. So I think that's not decided yet. I think the important thing is, well, the problem is, A.G. Bell and his approach using that bell curve, and those that have a lot of hearing got most of the services, and the ones that did not were kind of left out and neglected. But we don't use that model. We have, a variety of deaf children here, no matter what their hearing level is. So, and then when they kind of grow up, they can kind of, I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but I do like how you said unilateral deafness. That's one of the things, and maybe some people will start having that conversation, um, and try to figure out what it really means, and kind of open our minds for everybody that's involved in deaf services for children. Okay, beautiful. I hope that answered your question. A lot of people put a lot of comments that they enjoyed your presentation, and they want some of those videos that you had shared. So we will put all of that together and send that out. So it's great presentation. Now, somebody again asked if you could share a link of that video about language and the brain, excuse me, the part of brain that processes language. So we will do that. We'll include that. Also, your presentation, which age group were you talking about? The early start? That's 0 to 3. And those are the years that language is typically acquired. I mean, they're still figuring out things after that age, but what we see in like high school kids here at CSD campus, like at lunchtime, they kind of code switch. They have different ways of communicating. Sometimes I think speaking is happening more than signing on campus with the students. The students can sign so beautifully, much better than my time. Yeah, I can vouch for that. So in your presentation, how can we share these things with more of the mainstream programs and teachers of the deaf and families, so that they can have access to this type of information that you have shared in your resources? You talked about Core University, and just kind of wondering how we can take that presentation to the next level. Well, it all starts with you. If you're hearing, start turning your voice off and signing. At CSD in Northern California in Fremont, we have a really good relationship with deaf teachers all around the area, and we have very similar approaches. Some of these departments, it's for individual families and staff, so you've got to start somewhere. And a lot of agencies in Northern California see our program and want to, share that. So I think the important thing is just taking that first step. Yeah. Did you want to say something else? No, that's okay. Okay. So we have research that shows that a student that learns ASL does not affect their English. We had a family ask, so I wanted to respond. Do you have something that will show that research? Yeah, if you see the opening slide, the article by from SLPs, speech and language pathologists, we're talking about written English. We're talking about ASL not affecting written English. Well, I guess you might have to Google that, but so talking about written language, that is for any language in the world. That is the last skill that is developed. hearing children who, grow up, they learn to speak and so on. Written is last. So just keep in mind with the Early Start program here is we take the approach that handwriting is, like we'll have the kids trace. And that's the beginning of writing. So we've seen children really develop their writing skills, even though they are using sign language. After 30 years of doing this type of program, our kids are definitely doing better in writing. Excuse me. Next question says, how do you suggest we should offer spoken English support at deaf schools or in deaf programs for those kids who prefer spoken English as their preferred language, who maybe can hear a lot, maybe have unilateral hearing loss, or maybe ASL is just not their strength? How would you respond to that? Well, that question is, so that premise, the idea that ASL maybe not their strength, that's actually not true. Whether you're deaf or hearing, that is a strength. That doesn't mean it's the strength, but it's a strength for any baby, Now, as far as preference, we know that kids, when they're old enough to decide for themselves, that's fine. But the problem is that the hearing world tends to make the decision for the babies. And it's not until the parents learn that ASL works. We have some children here at school that are maybe in high school, and their parents can sign very well now. So we have things here. We have speech therapists for, to provide structure, language structure. And if they prefer that, they are free to go to a public school. But the point is that we don't decide for the children that they're going to speak or use English language. And it doesn't matter what kind of hearing loss they have. We all use ASL 100%. And then next is English. And when they're old enough to decide, they can decide which modality to use more. So I guess the basic point is that the foundation of both languages is ASL in both languages, right? So we provide access and a foundation of ASL, and then from then on, well, yes, but I guess the point is that hearing kids benefit from ASL. If they don't have any deaf relatives or anyone around them, they still benefit from ASL. And we know that, right? That's general fact. There's research that has proved that ASL benefits hearing children. So in fact, it also would benefit deaf children. So other question is, do you have a mentor or home visit program? Yes, I forgot to mention that. It's been hard the last couple of years with COVID, doing home visits and things like that, but we're slowly kind of coming back. I forgot to add that in, and that has been very important. Now, our coaching program is really great. In the last 2 years, I just want to thank everyone. The Sherry something at NorCal. Deaf coaches are probably make the greatest impact in mentoring students at their homes, at the store, different locations. Yeah, we call them deaf coaches here. And a lot of them, use 3 or more different languages. So I think all of the states really should adopt that deaf coaching, because I think that helps more than anything else. So the same person, the deaf parents of a uni-deaf child, says that in the IEP, the children who are unilaterally deaf, do they qualify for IEPs? Well, let me say that IEP tends to belong to special ed, but what we can do is modify that for deaf children. So here, most of our children's goals are in reading, writing, math, those kinds of things. There's not like a special need. As far as um, early childhood, they qualify for a lot of early start programs. The Lead K family services here are great, and that's for 0 to 5, getting ready, kids ready for kindergarten. So I'm sorry, what was the question again? Yeah, we were talking about how the IEPs work, how my kids can access an IEP. Well, if parents feel like, okay, IEPs are good ways, is a good way for your children to receive what they need. So, you might, you never know, your deaf kid might want to go to a deaf school or college. So what's the difference between IEPs and 504s? So it's interesting here in California, the oral programs for IFSPs, they use 504s, or they used 504s, and that kind of disappeared. They weren't receiving services anymore. And we want to avoid the 504 if at all possible. That's, I'm not I'm sort of a radical. It might not, that's my opinion. Okay, so we have about 1 minute left, and there's 2 comments I'm going to try to get out real quick. One of them says the strategies for language plans in ASL and English, expressive and receptive. Yeah, again, in our early start, we have sort of a checklist. Same with California Lead K and SB 210, we have California checklists. And so they're very similar to VCLS. So thank you for reminding me. I should have added that there's a checklist. And in ASL and English, their teachers at school have that. And the DRA development reading assessment, we already track the kids at 14, starting at 14 months old. We do, different things that are on the checklist, and we monitor them. And their ASL and English all the way up to age 22. And we use, in early start, we use the SB 210 checklist. It's language milestones, so that hearing parents know what to expect. I think deaf parents, kind of know what to expect from their deaf children, but maybe not. So we don't want to separate that out like we did before. And after they're 5, they will use ASL comprehension tests, which is very popular in K through 12 right now. And there are other English assessments and tests. Okay, definitely. Okay, I think our time is out. So I just wanted to thank Dave very much for your time and your presentation. And so I look forward to putting everything together and catching up from previous sessions. And again, this is recorded, so you might look at it again and think about maybe some things. I'm going to try to break down all of the videos and everything that will benefit you guys. And thank you so much for being involved and being willing to grow. And so until next time, thank you very much. Bye. Love you all. Thanks all the interpreters, Spanish and English. Bye.